Characters are the root of an interesting story. Even if you have the perfect world built, it will be nothing without characters. Characters can really make or break a story, so it is important that you write good and dynamic characters for others to relate to. In this video, I will be giving tips from my own opinions onto making good and dynamic and relatable and likable characters. I have created many different types of characters for many different types of stories in my lifetime, so I figured I'd share a few tips that helped me create those characters and make them likable, at least to me. The first tip I have is giving your character an exterior look that's gonna reflect what type of person they are. For example, people use clothes to express themselves, so judging on your character's clothing style can really tell what type of person they are. For instance, upon looking at a character dressed in all black, I'm going to judge that that character is probably on the quieter side, more reserved, maybe a lone wolf. Judging by a character in bright pastel or pink clothing, I'm guessing that that character is very fun and outgoing. Sometimes I even like to go a little bit deeper in my character design, as in reflecting a part of their backstory on their exterior looks. For instance, I have this family who has been traumatized in the past, therefore all of their eyes, I draw them big and wide. And you can even go beyond clothing style with even like facial features, like if your character is very serious type person, maybe give them like narrow like eyes. Sometimes I even base my characters off of like a certain animal, like a cat or a dog, and I give them like features on them that would reflect that animal. Like for a dog, I usually do like a looser, like more like rounder facial features, while a cat has more sharp and like narrow facial features. I also like giving my characters a name that will also reflect their personality. And sometimes I even like to mislead on purpose by naming a character something like cute and soft, but having the character be like, you know, all tough and serious and scary. I feel like that could make a character more likable because it's just unique and funny in a sense. And the next tip I have would be personality, which is just a given. The biggest thing about personality is giving your character an equal amount of weaknesses and strengths. I even like to give like the weaknesses and strengths kind of a relation in a way. Like say your character, their strength is that they know how to love, but then the weakness is that they love so hard that they fear being alone. Not only does that help the character be relatable, but it also puts the character in a sort of dilemma. It just makes for a better and interesting story, in my opinion. And speaking about the character being relatable, that is also a big thing you want to do with their personality, is make them relatable to other people. Making them relatable to other people is just gonna draw attraction from the audience and make your character more liked. You can make your character more relatable by giving them a universal struggle. Basically, give them a struggle that a lot of people struggle with in real life. You could also give your character a struggle that you struggle with in real life. You could even hide these struggles in another bigger struggle. Like for instance, maybe your character is in a fantasy world and is fighting a dragon and they're losing against the dragon and they're starting to feel helpless. Like, nobody is going to relate to fighting a dragon in real life, but they could relate it to maybe they battled something and started losing and they started feeling helpless as well. You also want to ask yourself, how do they interact with others and how do others view them? Like, think of scenarios and put them in that scenario and think of how they're going to react. And if there's other people in this scenario, think about how they're going to interact with those people. Like, are they going to be a leader for this group of people, or are they going to be a follower? And then think of how that group of people might view them. Like, did you design your character to be overly bossy? If so, then the group of people might get annoyed by their constant, bossiness. I like to get into the character's head and really think of what they are thinking. I like to give them their own sense of humor. I like to give them their own special quirks. Like, every single character I have ever created, I try to give them their own special quirk that none of the other ones have, and it makes them stand out and it makes them unique. The next tip I have would be dialogue. Give them their own special way of speaking that makes the reader really know that it's that character speaking when their dialogue shows up. You can make their way of speaking reflect their personality, their background, and their emotional state. I always take time to think about how my character speaks and what their dialogue is going to look like. Some ways to make your character's dialogue a little more interesting is maybe give them an accent that you could write in their dialogue, like a southern accent is pretty easy to write. And then also maybe give them a stutter. There's honestly a whole bunch of ways that you can make your character's dialogue unique from other characters in the story. And then on to the next tip, although it's not really a tip, it's more of just a given, is to give your character a backstory. Before your character becomes likable and realistic and relatable, you have to fully understand your character, and the best way to do that is to create their backstory. You want to create as many details as possible in their backstory, but try to stay away from the details that don't matter to the story, because they're just going to crowd your mind and it's just unnecessary. If you're having trouble coming up with a backstory, I always look for media. I always maybe take something I've read or seen in real life, maybe something you saw in the news, and maybe if you have like an aesthetic you're interested in, then you can base their backstory off of that aesthetic. A backstory is truly what builds the character into what they are today, and so it's important to figure out what events really shape that character in their past. The next tip is one that I think is very important, at least it is for me, and that is you have to be interested in your character for it to become an interesting character. Give them personality traits that you are interested in. Make them a likable character to you personally. I see my characters as not only an actual human being, but I also see them as a fragment of my own mind. I like to take traits from my favorite characters in media, and I like to take them and add them to my own characters. That just personally really makes the character more interesting to myself. It's basically taking something that you're already interested in and making it your own and possibly making it even better. Now, I'm not saying to steal somebody else's OC or make a complete copy of another character, but I am saying that you can and you are allowed to take traits from already existing characters, as long as you're not stealing very specific traits to somebody's character, then you're just copying basically. And I usually name characters after other characters that I like. I don't necessarily do this because I want to base a character off of a character that I like. I do this more as kind of even a timestamp onto when I made the character, and I know that sounds weird, but let me explain. A few years ago is when I created a lot of the characters that are kind of my main characters right now that I focus on the most, and a lot of those characters were actually named after things, people, or characters from other media that I was interested in back then. For instance, my main character, Boo, was named after Boo Radley from To Kill a Mockingbird, which is a book I read in 2021 when I created Boo. Shortly before I created Boo, I read that book. But where I'm really getting at is one of the most important things is to make your character at your own standards and care less about what other people are going to think and care more about what you think about your own character, because that's really when you can make a really interesting character, is when you were really interested in the character. You can really tell if you look at all of my characters who I am interested in the most, because those characters are more fleshed out, they have more backstory, they have more details about themselves, they feel like real human beings versus the characters that I am not so interested in. That is about all the tips I have for you, and so I hope you learned something, and I hope I helped you in creating your character. Feel free to comment if you think I missed anything, or if you have any questions. If you need help creating a character, comment down below, and I will try my best to help you. I'm not a professional at this by any means. I'm just a person who has created many characters in her life, and it's a really big hobby of mine. It's something I really focus on. So I thought I'd just, share some of my opinions with people who may be struggling creating characters. And I think I posted something like this in the past, but it was years ago, and I don't really remember what I said in it. So I thought I'd just make an updated version. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you when I post next, whenever that would be. So goodbye.